Sunday morning cold, eyes on the score, touchdown dance ball, craving for more. Friends are calling, trades are on fire. Rookies falling, championship desire. Fantasy football fever, chasing the dream. Top of the leaderboard, we're the winning team.
This is the Fantasy Football Healers program brought to you by Independence Day. We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day. Happy 4th of July, everybody. We're exactly 27 days till the NFL Hall of Fame game kicks off on July 31st. The Lions versus the Chargers. While you're awaiting Harry Potter's birthday and providing us with a magical football game, you can visit Fast Draft, an app that allows you to draft origins for all rookie draft. Flex 4, which is an all flex draft. You can draft up to 6 players and add boosts to them. Or perhaps you want to try the new format, the Rabbit, and chase your way into one of the best full best ball formats on the planet. Just use the promo code HEALERS for a $50 first-time deposit match. At the halfway mark of this 2025 year, I look back and all the opportunities and friends that we've met along the way with the podcast, kicking the season off with the NFL Combine in Indy, meeting some NFL agents, scouts, and Combine officials, a few NFL players, and let's not forget, we brought on Zach with Breaking the Quarterback Code and Zach the Romeo Kid with his wide receiver model. Arnold Schwarzenegger went back in time and he gave us a preview to the first round of the NFL draft. But not only that, we were only 1 point behind Chris Collinsworth on the Huddle Report just this year. Colton Palmer bringing life into the world with Grayson, and now we are being invited to the Scott Fish Bowl to compete against thousands of NFL analysts, celebrities, former athletes, and maybe even you, our viewers. It amazes me how big the Scott Fish Bowl has become now in its 15th season, working with @Fantasy Cares to add a charitable element to fantasy sports. Donations going to Toys for Tots, Every Meal, No Kid Hungry, Feeding America, Dog Rescues, Go Pantry, JDRF, the Sarah Foundation, Road Dogs Rescue, Make-A-Wish, and so many more. If you want a full list, you can go to @Fantasy Cares to see the full list of foundations that they help support. You can simply donate to Fantasy Cares, or you can go to the Fantasy Cares shop for some really great merch. This year, I got a Scott Fish Bowl 15 St. Louis Blues shirt to represent the division that I'm playing in the Scott Fish Bowl. I'm very excited to share my shirt on the podcast in the coming weeks, but if you want a preview, all you have to do is check it out at FF Healers on Twitter X. Scott Fish also wants to provide a big giveaway show at the end of the summer. There will be a Nintendo Switch 2, signed memorabilia, Scott Fish Bowl 16 spots, Fantasy Care Shop gift cards, and so much more. Just visit @Fantasy Cares or go to their website at fantasycares.org for more details on how to win. Now it's time to take a breath and step back and see what the Scott Fish Bowl tournament looks like after receiving this invite. I had a week to make a decision on which division I wanted to compete in. My wife was from the St. Charles, Missouri area, so I decided to go with the St. Louis Blues division, where I'll face off with 11 other players in my league for 11 weeks. But I'm not really just playing against them. I'm playing against thousands of players in an attempt to have the highest fantasy points and enter the playoffs with a chance to win merchandise or cash. But that's not why we play. We play for the glory. We got to have guts to have a chance at winning. No guts, no glory. Let's check out the roster and league settings. So as I'm going on, all I have to do is just do a quick search for Scott Fish Bowl scoring. I happen to be using the Player Profiler article that was presented, I believe, back in June. Scott Fish Bowl scoring this year is scoring basics are there's 6 points for all touchdowns, 2 points for all 2-point conversions. You get a 0.04 yards per passing. You get 0.1 yards for rushing and receiving. You get 1 point per first down. Volume is king. You also get a 0.5 point per carry. On MFL, you get an additional 1 point per target and 1 point per reception. But in the Sleeper app, they basically quantify it as a 2.5 points per reception on the Sleeper app. Tight ends also get an extra point per reception, so it is tight end premium. But here's where the twist comes. Travis Hunter continues to get propelled up because, as we spoke just last week, Travis Hunter's points just by themselves aren't enough. So fantasy analysts and fantasy players, they're hungry for more points for Travis Hunter, and so they prop him up and only him up with the IDP scoring. We have to start and play 11 starters, and we have 11 players on our bench. And so Travis Hunter is the only player in fantasy football in the Scott Fish Bowl that allows you to get additional points for sacks, 6 points, safeties, 6 points, interceptions caught, 6 points. That's ridiculous. Interception caught for 6 points for Travis Hunter. A blocking punt, field goal, or PAT, 3 points. Forced fumble, 3 points. Fumble recovery from the opponent, 3 points. A tackle, 2 points. Assisted tackle, 1 point. A tackle for loss, 1 point. Pass defended, 1 point. So as you can see, Travis Hunter has an exceptional extra amount of points that he could receive, not only on the offense, but on the defense. And so while you're watching the Jaguars play, you can be rooting for Travis Hunter on both sides of the ball the entire game, all 17 games in the 18-game season. So how high will Travis Hunter go? I've listened to some podcasts, and I've heard Travis Hunter going about at the 5 spot in the first round, but I've also heard him go as late as the end of the second. And so it'll definitely provide some strategy to know what kind of players that we're looking at. In the starting lineups of the 11, you can play up to 2 quarterbacks, so it can be a super flex format. But with, again, all the settings that you have, you don't necessarily want to start 2 quarterbacks each and every week. We don't want to be super flex heroes here. So it's very, very much that you need to be mindful of all of the point settings. So again, you got your Travis Hunters, but then you also have your running backs that are getting a ton of carries. You get your wide receivers that are receiving a ton of targets and a ton of receptions. So again, volume is king. But we can't just go there. What about the tight ends? The tight ends, they also get an extra point per reception. And so this is going to be a balancing act to figure out come Monday when the Scott Fish Bowl scoring format comes out. Let's take a peek at last year. Who would have been the top scorers in the league? So I'm on another website here, and I'm looking at some of the top scorers. And some of the top scorers from just last year include guys like Saquon Barkley and Jamar Chase, Lamar Jackson, of course, because of his rushing upside. You got Gibbs, Henry, Bowers, McBride, Jacobs, and also Bijan. And so volume is king. We all know that Derrick Henry was a volume machine. Lamar Jackson had the upside with his rushing mobility and the high number of passing touchdowns that he had last year. Josh Jacobs was the only healthy running back that played just about every snap for the Packers. Saquon Barkley was a beast, as we all know. Bijan Robinson, he finally took a step forward just last year. Jamar Chase, probably he's either the top or at least the top 3 wide receivers in the NFL. Just depends whether you're thinking that whether it's Chase or Jefferson, in my opinion, and maybe a close neighbors. Bowers and McBride, were just complete beasts. Trey McBride was the number one receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, and Brock Bowers last year was easily the number one target for the Raiders. Just complete value machines. So as we marvel at these new settings for the Scott Fish Bowl each and every year always has interesting formats to decide and to compete with. This year on Monday, July 9th, I'll be in a long draft on the Sleeper app. We've got 8 hours to make a pick. They're really encouraging us all to draft within the first 4 hours because they want to make sure that the league is active and the league is going forward and that people aren't just doing auto picks. Scott Fish Bowl is a league that you have to do a lineup league. And so you are drafting 22 players. You have to start 11. Again, an all flex league. 2 can be super flex. And so we need to know which kind of players that we're going to be going for. But not only that, when are waivers going to be hit? So at the start of the season, that's when they will open up waivers on that Wednesday before the NFL season starts to allow us to have opportunities to pick up guys that are starting to smash in the preseason, pick up guys and drop guys that are maybe attaining value or losing value, maybe due to injury or maybe due to suspensions. It could be anything. And so having the opportunity to have waivers is great. Trades aren't allowed at all in this league. So I think that's very helpful because if you have friends and stuff, you don't want to offset having really bad trades go through and propelling teams forward. So I do like that aspect. You just never know who's connected to who with so many thousands of people that are playing. So I feel like that's a really good idea for the Scott Fish Bowl. Scott Fish Bowl, how did I get in? Really, it was going to Scott Fish Bowl, applying for the Scott Fish Bowl. Anyone can sign up. And then I was just listening in on Twitter X and seeing when are they going to be sending out invitations, communicating with the people that are with the Scott Fish Bowl, seeing if there's any openings that are available and just keeping my ears to the ground. And so I'm really blessed to have an opportunity to play in the Scott Fish Bowl this coming year. I'm going to open up the app now and just let's take a peek and see which players are ADP wise on the top of the board. Simply search and see who the top ADP is, or we could go into a mock draft right now and basically just see what the lineups look like. And so as I'm opening up the Scott Fish Bowl 15 St. Louis Blues division, we can look at the current ADPs. ADP 101 is Josh Allen. I'll just give the top 10 right now just for some of our viewers and listeners. So we've got Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jamar Chase, Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, Bijan Robinson, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Hurts, Gibbs, and Saquon Barkley. And then, of course, you got Bowers and Lamb and Genty to follow. And so a lot of those players are players that we just talked about who would have been the top scorers just from last year. We can't just go only off of just last year's data. We've got to look ahead, and we've got to have a determination of who do we think is going to score the most points. Who do I think is going to score more points between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson? Well, we talked about that last week. Last week, Colton said that his number one quarterback is Josh Allen. I talked about how Lamar Jackson is the Lords of Death. He's the guy. He's throwing the touchdowns. He's taking steps forward. He's getting the weapons on the offense with the wide receivers. He's got multiple tight ends to throw to. They've got a deep roster. They got Derrick Henry, and God forbid what happens if Derrick Henry was to go down. Well, now they're going to have to lean on Lamar Jackson that much more. Josh Allen, he's just a guy that the Buffalo Bills are completely leaning on. They didn't really provide him with much additions on the offense. And I'm not really sold on the Buffalo Bills offense as a whole with the wide receivers that they currently have on their core. I love Shakir. Keon Coleman, he had the wrist injury last year. Can he take a step forward? Remember, he was the pick number 33 in the NFL draft in 2024. And he just didn't look right when he was playing. So now that he's a year removed from having his wrist injury, maybe Keon Coleman is a value in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So he might be a guy to consider maybe late in this year's fantasy football drafts or the Scott Fish Bowl, but he's not somebody that I'm going to lean all my chips on. And so Josh Allen, again, is maybe a guy that's a little bit scarier, in my opinion, to be that number 101 ADP. If we divide this up based on points, so the screen that I'm showing actually shows that Josh Allen is projected for the highest points. But if I'm looking at my app on my phone, it actually has Bijan Robinson with points as high as 690 points, Saquon at 687, Gibbs at 657, then Chase, then Genty, then McCaffrey, Achane, Henry, Jefferson, Jacobs, Lamb. And I've got to scroll all the way down to, let's see, boy, they still have it, ADP Lamar Jackson at 2. But I've got to scroll a little ways down. He's going to be closer to the turn for Lamar Jackson. And so I think it's interesting that if I'm going on my computer and I'm looking at the projected points, it's just different for some reason on this app versus if I just go on the app on my phone and sort by total points. What I'm really curious about is if I sort by points, how far down is Travis Hunter? And so I'm going. I'm still not finding Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter, where are you? And boy, oh boy, he is a little ways down. Travis Hunter, finally, he's all the way down at 64 if you go based on total points, which I find is very, very interesting because per the settings, you would think that Travis Hunter would be a first round pick with total points based on what he's playing on offense and on defense. His total points as projected on Sleeper, on the Sleeper app on my phone, it says his projected points is 425.7 with an ADP of 64.1. Now, I understand that Sleeper has ADPs for a lot of these players that aren't specific to the Scott Fish Bowl, but especially as the Scott Fish Bowl starts to kick off, these ADPs are probably going to change. And so it's going to be a strategy to really be understanding and really have an understanding of when and how to pivot when you're starting to see changes in the ADP. Travis Hunter is definitely going to be reached on in the first round or the second round, but is that the right move? I truly don't know. This is going to be a very unique setting as a whole. Not only is he getting touchdowns, but he has all the opportunities to get an interception for an additional 6 points. That's as many as a touchdown for any of these players. So the advantage definitely goes to Travis Hunter. So be on the lookout for Travis Hunter. It's just going to be one of those guys like, do I have the conviction that Travis Hunter is going to be providing that many points, or is he going to be making that much more? And my thought process is based on the settings, he's probably a guy that you want to reach on. In any other format outside the Scott Fish Bowl, I really don't know if I want to have anything to do with Travis Hunter because of not knowing how much offense or how much defense that this guy's going to play. But in the Scott Fish Bowl, you have every opportunity to get every little bit of points, interceptions, tackles, fumbles. I think he's really the hot topic when it comes to the Scott Fish Bowl. So let's come back to the Sleeper app here on the screen that's provided. Now, let's say volume is king. So we just went to projected points. You can kind of see a list here. If we go to rushing, let's see who the top rushers are. If we're going based on attempts, as you can imagine, Saquon Barkley has projected 300 attempts with 1,600 yards and 11 touchdowns. And that's not even including the receiving that he'd have additional point values for and the receiving touchdowns. So Saquon Barkley definitely has a significant amount of value in this format. Bijan Robinson is projected to have 285 attempts for a little over 1,300 yards and, again, 11 touchdowns plus the receiving. With Bijan Robinson versus Saquon Barkley, how do you choose between the two? Well, Bijan Robinson has to compete with Tyler Algier in the backfield. And we saw when they had Arthur Smith that they were being a little more split between the two. But last year, Bijan, he took a step forward. Arthur Smith, he moved over to the Steelers. And so that helped propel Bijan Robinson that much forward. I think the Atlanta Falcons are going to have a better offense as a whole now that they have Penix under center. And because remember last year they had a broken Kirk Cousins. He wasn't healthy at all. But Saquon Barkley, he had every opportunity for all the rushing attempts. Although when he gets closer to the goal line, then he has to compete with Jalen Hurts. So these guys are definitely the top tier running backs that you'd probably want to get here in the early first round. Derrick Henry, 285 attempts. He is just a yeti of a man. And again, who is he competing with? He's competing with Lamar Jackson for rushing attempts. But Derrick Henry, he's going to have all the scoring abilities that are right there in front of him. 13 rushing touchdowns he's projected for. Does have a little downside in regards to his receiving, but he is a very capable back. And if they were to throw to him even that much more often, he can easily surpass 143 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. But the Baltimore Ravens do have a number of wide receivers and tight ends to throw to, so probably not that much more in regards to the receiving game. And then with him being a little bit on the older side, you have to imagine, like, when does the floor drop for Derrick Henry? And last year, there's a lot of people that lost in fantasy because they faded him. And Derrick Henry proved to be one of the healthiest running backs in the league, and he had the volume to boot. Ashton Gentry, he is definitely a high projected running back. You've got all these people that have completed their rookie drafts. There's such an Ashton Gentry like move right now. You know, the 101 and Dynasty Fantasy Football drafts. There's a lot of excitement to go with the Raiders this year. And so Ashton Gentry, a projection of 280 attempts for 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. The question with Gentry is how often are they going to be in the red zone? And then we have Jonathan Taylor, and you've got Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams being one of the smaller all-purpose running backs in the league. Not one of the guys that I like to target in fantasy football drafts because of his size and his lack of athleticism, but he's proved me wrong for the past 2 years. But now they've added more competition with Hunter in the backfield. They're projecting Kyren Williams for 260 attempts for 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. I think the Rams are still going to provide a lot of scoring opportunities, which on the contrary, Jonathan Taylor for Indianapolis, he's projected to have a lot of attempts with 279 attempts for the rushing yards with 1,300 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns. But, you know, is Jonathan Taylor truly going to get 10 touchdowns? Is this Indianapolis Colts offense going to be in the red zone to score points? That's where my concern is for the Indianapolis Colts. And then not only that, for Jonathan Taylor, he's a guy that's been injured for the last 2 seasons, and he's been out a number of games. So he's a guy that's kind of questionable, in my opinion, on do you want to take that leap of faith in the Scott Fish Bowl against thousands of people with the Jonathan Taylor being drafted early on in your Scott Fish Bowl drafts. And then finally, you've got the next 3, Josh Jacobs, you got Hubbard, and you got Gibbs. The one that stands out here is actually Chuba Hubbard, with him being projected with 240 attempts for a little over 1,000 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. I think he's the odd man out. Again, they have added a lot more to the backfield. They've added some weapons for Bryce Young. I think the Panthers are going to try and take a step forward with Bryce Young and throw the ball around a little bit more. Does the receiving upside increase with Hubbard instead of having like a projected 272 receiving yards and 1 touchdown? Maybe that's where it boosts up a little bit more to offset some of the rushing opportunities. But if you had to choose between Josh Jacobs, Hubbard, and Gibbs, I mean, come on. Gibbs, Jacobs, they're going to be guys that are going to be having a lot more volume than Hubbard. Now, let's just take a step here in regards to targets. So looking for targets, receptions. It doesn't say reception, so maybe I just have to hit receiving yards instead. I think that's where maybe I'm messing up. Okay, so if I'm looking here in the Scott Fish Bowl with receiving yards, Justin Jefferson is projected with a little over 1,400 receiving yards for 8 touchdowns, while Jamar Chase is projected for a little over 1,300 receiving yards and 11 touchdowns. Then it goes to Nico, Brian Thomas, Puka, CD, Amon-Ra, A.J. Brown, and then finally you get to Malik Neighbors. And what's fun to look at when you're looking at the screen is you can see the receiving yards along with the touchdown upside. But if you look all the way to the left, you can see here with the ADP where some of these players are getting drafted. And so where is the value in these picks? And so if I'm looking for value, I'm looking at Justin Jefferson getting drafted at the 7 spot, Chase around the 3, 4, and then you got Nico Collins right there at 20.5, Brian Thomas at 17.4, Puka at 16 ADP, Lamb at 11, Amon-Ra at 15, and A.J. Brown at 28. So if I was looking at this at a value standpoint, which players do I have more of an interest in drafting, especially if I'm trying to get that extra 2 points per reception? I'd be looking at guys like Nico at the 20, or if you really want, go to A.J. Brown, the number 1 target for the Philadelphia Eagles at ADP 28.7. And so this is what I got to do in regards to looking at the Scott Fish Bowl and just kind of taking in the thoughts of how the scoring system is. It's so different from any of the other fantasy drafts. These are all flex positions. That means you can draft anybody and they can be a starter or a player that you're going to be playing each and every week. And so I can't just look at super flex. I can't just marvel at the receiving yards that these receivers are going to get. I need to also have the opportunities and see who's going to have all the rushing attempts, who's going to have more targets, who's going to have more opportunities for the first downs. And that is pretty much the strategy for the Scott Fish Bowl as a whole. So it's basically up to me to navigate this labyrinth of players and scoring formats to really determine what my team's going to look like. I'm really excited to share my draft with you, the viewers, at FF Healers. And please continue to follow, and I'll keep giving updates as the podcasts go on. I want to thank you all for listening to this. It's a shorter program, but again, it's just I wanted to have the opportunity to provide details on the Scott Fish Bowl because I found that a lot of my friends that I'm talking to really didn't know what the Scott Fish Bowl was. And so now you have more of an opportunity to know what the Scott Fish Bowl is all about. Don't forget to go to fantasycares.org to make donations. Go to Scott Fish Bowl to apply for. Maybe there's some more openings that are available. You better hurry because, again, the drafts are going to be starting on Monday. But more likely, the Scott Fish Bowl 16 might be an opportunity for you. And if I'm lucky, I'll have the opportunity to not only play this year, but to continue to play in the years to come. On behalf of the Fantasy Football Healers, we would like to wish you a happy 4th of July. Godspeed.